Morning once again, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion, our POPIA panel discussion with the Information Regulator. My name is Sicelo Kula, and I'm an IT lawyer at Michalsons. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with everyone in the way that we've set out and that I'll be briefly covering in the agenda. I think I'll just give us just one more moment just so that everyone can come in, because I know that you might not immediately have everyone, although it's looking quite good now. We've got almost a full house. Okay, I think in the interest of time, I should probably just kick off. Okay, so for today's panel discussion from the Michalsons side of things, I'll be joined by John Giles, the managing attorney of Michalsons. We'll also be joined by Mark Hank, the senior attorney from Michalsons, and we'll also be joined by Nathan Ross. And then from the Information Regulator, we'll be joined by not only members of the Information Regulator, but also some people from the executive management as well. In terms of the members, we'll be joined by Advocate Pansy Tlakula, who's the chairperson, Advocate Lebogang Stroom Zama, who's a full-time member, Advocate Colin Weepend, and then Mr. Sizwe Snail Kamtuze, who's a part-time member. And then in terms of the executive management, we're joined by Ms. Varsha Seolal, we're joined by Advocate Tebogo Kilauetswe, and we're also joined by Mr. Nzubedzeni Nemasisi. I just want to go back to the agenda just to quickly give an overview of today's session. So really, in terms of today, apart from just this introduction that I've done now, I'll also be looking to run some polls just to get a good sense of who's in the room. And an important, just before I go on, another person that's also joining us is the compliance officer of the Mr. Price Group, Claire Williamson as well. Yes, and then apart from the polls that I'll run to get a good sense of who's in the room, please feel free to ask some questions as we go along. And you'll see further down that Nathan will be looking to identify some of the key themes that come from your questions as well. We'll have a bit done by John Giles just to give some sort of introduction. We'll have Mark Hank just talking about the importance of the Information Regulator. We'll have some introductory remarks from Advocate Pansy Tlakula. We'll have a Q&A session where we get to ask various questions. And then also we'll have John just identifying some of those key themes that Nathan will have picked out. And then we'll essentially wrap up. The one other thing that I thought I wanted to mention is that there were, of course, a number of questions that we got from people, and thanks a lot for asking those questions. And we'll try and get to them, but of course, there are various time constraints and we can't get to all the questions. The other thing is that there were a number of people from business, representatives from business that we could have invited, but time being one of the limiting things, we ended up settling on Claire. But I think she will be a good representative. Okay, I think let me get into some of these polls. So I'll just launch the first one. And this is really just to get a sense of your role as the individual attending, just to get a sense of what your role is. And I won't spend too much time considering that there are a number of polls. So if you could just quickly try and vote. Okay, that's looking good. People are really voting quite quickly. Okay, I think let's end that one and then just share the results. If you have a look here, I see that there are quite a lot of people that are from governance, risk, or compliance, but it looks like we have quite an even spread of different people that are CEOs, heads of the organization, governing body members, information officers, data protection officers, and we have a lot of people from legal, which is quite interesting as well, and project managers. And then we have others. So I'll stop sharing that one and get into the second one. And this one is to really get a sense of what role your organization primarily plays in some of its key activities. You'll see here we have a number of options. Are you the controller or responsible party? Are you a processor? Are you a joint responsible party? Perhaps you're not sure, which is also understandable. And then also, what industry are you in? Which I think is quite a good question to get a good sense. I see Candace Sutherland raised a hand. So as we go along through the session, we'll try and get time to address some of the different questions that come along. But at this point, we'll just try and follow what we've set out in the agenda. Okay, so I'll just end this poll and then share the results. So we've got quite a lot of people who are responsible parties, who say they are responsible parties for who say their role in some of their most important activities is that of a responsible party. And then of course, an operator, a joint responsible party. And then some are also not sure, which is again understandable. But yes, we certainly got a good number of those. And then we've got a number of people from financial services, which is quite interesting. And it seems like those, and then others. So we've really got a nice audience, very mixed, covering a broad spectrum. And then I'll just launch the final poll at this stage. So if you could also just start voting. Okay, it's looking good. At least half the attendees have voted. I'll just give it a few more moments. Okay, I think I'm going to end the poll at this point. It seems like a lot of people, just looking at the different challenges that they're facing, the biggest one seems to be that they're not sure where to start. But we do have a number of other ones as well, such as compliance fatigue, and then lack of resources in the form of people and other priorities. But the one about where not being sure where to start seems to be one of the biggest hurdles, which is quite interesting. Okay, I think let me stop there. Yeah, at this point, John, I'll just hand over to you. I don't know if there's anything that you want to share, because I'm planning on stopping to share this agenda.
Perfect, Sikela. Thanks very much. And welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to have you here and to have this session. At Michalsons, we believe that the law should be accessible, empowering, and helpful. And really, that's the purpose of today's session, is to try and achieve exactly that. So I'm very excited to have this session. And I think it's really nice now that we have a deadline for compliance with POPIA, being 1 July 2021, because it's able to focus our attention. And I really believe that we all have a common goal, and that's to be as ready as we possibly can be by that deadline to protect personal information. And it is daunting, and it's interesting looking at that poll about the challenges. The challenges are significant. There are many issues that are very serious, grave issues in South Africa and in the world at the moment. And it's difficult to get started with this, but it's a very important issue. And I think through collaboration, through working together, through conversations, through discussions, we're able to solve problems collectively. And I think that that's the only way that we're gonna meet this deadline and be in a position to protect personal information. And I think we all agree that this is a very important issue. We need to protect personal information to protect data subjects from harm. We've seen a spike in cybercrime during lockdown, and it's very important that we don't give criminals the personal information they need to commit their crimes. And then also, I think at a country level, South Africa needs to be showing the world that we are a country that protects personal information so that we can participate in the global data economy, and we're able to then attract foreign direct investment. And I think this is a key point. We need to be showing the world that we have adequate protections in place, particularly as we come out of COVID. Countries will be competing with each other, and it is, I think, an important point. And then I also wanted to mention that access to information is another very important concept, and the information regulator is responsible for both protecting personal information and access to information. And just to illustrate the importance of this, I thought I'd tell you a really quick story. So a confession that I have is that I've got a sweet tooth and I love biscuits. And in the office, when we were still all in the office, we had a stash of biscuits in a very dark cupboard in the kitchen. And what happened is that the biscuits got eaten very quickly, and a lot of people accused me of eating most of the biscuits, which probably wasn't misplaced. But what we decided, and what we thought would be an idea, is to move the biscuits into a cookie jar, which is an owl, and we placed that in the middle of our open plan section of the office with the biscuits in that cookie jar. And it was remarkable, the difference. The biscuits got eaten a lot slower, and obviously everybody could see who was eating the biscuits, and some people would come and eat biscuits with other people eating biscuits at the same time. And for me, it's just a great example of access to information or transparency and what happens when that's the case. And so access to information, freedom of information is a very important point, which is as important as protecting personal information. And I think that's enough from me. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Mark Hank. Mark really needs no introduction to many of you, and Mark's going to be speaking on the importance of the role of the information regulator. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, John. In the 1990s, when I first started looking at data protection, what became very evident to me was the importance of data protection in our modern world. And what I also recognized was that it was those countries that had a strong information regulator that were actually doing the best job of data protection, and also as part of that being able to, it was in those countries that we saw combating of cybercrime actually being successful. So in working with the South African Law Reform Commission that drafted the bill that ultimately became POPI, and in working in Parliament, I continuously stress the importance of the information regulator, because I believe that this is a critical institution in a 21st century world. And you know, John has mentioned two things that I think illustrate the importance of this to us. So the first is just simply where we are in the lockdown at the moment. We are seeing these spikes in cybercrime. And I believe that it is as a result of the fact that we've not been in the position, and the information regulators not yet been placed in the position to properly deal with data protection. So the raw material for the cyber criminals is out there and it's easy to get. The second thing, for those that might doubt the importance of data protection, is what happened just over 2 weeks ago with the Schrems 2 case in the Court of Justice in the European Union. And there, the court struck down the privacy shield because the protection of personal information in the USA was not adequate. So information from the EU going to the USA was not adequate. Now, bear in mind that this is something where trillions of dollars of information and value is being exchanged. So it's not a decision that the court would take lightly, but it was a decision they felt compelled to make to protect the data, or to protect the data of the citizens of the European Union. So it is against this background that we see the information regulator being assigned this task and entrusted with this task of looking after us in this century. And against that background, I'm really pleased. I've worked with both Colin and Sizwe previously in a role in the National Cybersecurity Advisory Council that was set up by the Department of Communications. I've worked with Lebogang, and I've also know that Advocate Lukula, in the short time of our democracy, has been entrusted with very, very important roles. First of all, the Independent Electoral Commission, and now obviously this role. And Advocate Lukula, I really have a great deal of respect for you, and I think that this is a role that you are going to need assistance with, and part of the responsibilities are those of consultation, and we really want to engage with you and hear what you have to say in how we're going to deal with this very difficult task that you have in front of you. And if I may hand over to you to hear your comments, and I guess previously I might have said I give you the floor, but as it is in the times that we're in, I give you the ether. So Advocate Lukula, if you could please address us. I'm sure everybody is waiting to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let me say good morning to everyone and thank Michalsons to put this webinar together. We appreciate it because it also assists us as the regulator to reach as many people as possible as we all prepare for compliance with POPIA. As we all know, the regulator consists of 5 members, 2 part-time and 3 full-time members. We were elected on the 1st of December 2016 for a period of 5 years. And to say that the 5 years has come and it's going very quickly, because next year in October, I think the 5 years will come to an end. You probably are aware that one of the part-time members resigned, left the regulator to join her family in New Zealand. So there is a vacancy for a part-time member. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services will be conducting interviews this week to fill in that vacancy. Yes, we've come a long way. We have been preaching since 2016 when we appointed the importance of public and private bodies putting their compliance systems and procedures in place. Now we are here. Next year, on the 1st of July, the POPIA will, they will be able to enforce the act. So we're going to be using this period between now and next year for consultations that we have been doing over a period. And I welcome the offer by Mike to assist us. Indeed, it's a new area of the law in South Africa, and our law is a little bit different from, say, the Gdpr, because For instance, it applies also to juristic persons. We protect the personal information of juristic persons. And when it comes to POPIA, it applies to private and public bodies. And when you look at what happens out there globally, regulators such as ours do not protect private bodies, doesn't deal with private bodies. So we implore everyone to cooperate with us. As you know, the regulator has quite wide powers, including enforcement powers, which we're hoping that we will not be using, because we're hoping that everybody will comply, and we will use this one period to keep very close to one another in order to know what needs to be done. What have we been doing? What has been keeping us busy? You'd know that when we started, it was just 5 of us as members. So we started by putting together the administrative wing of the regulator. We're glad to report that we have now the CEO and we have 5 executives. I think we'll have the last one on education and communication joining the organization before the end of the year. At the core business level, you'd know that we issued a guidance note on processing of personal information of data subjects in the management of COVID. You are also aware that we issued a draft guidelines for development of codes of conduct, and we received, in fact, I counted the submissions that we received. There are 600 actually. So what we are doing, and we are coming to the tail end of that, we've been looking at each and every submission that we have received, and in the interest of transparency and fair administrative process, we record each decision that we take. If we take a comment, we take it. If we don't take a submission, we then record why we have not considered that submission. It's time consuming, but we think it's important for us to go through that process in the interest of transparency and openness. We also published the guidelines for registration of information officers. The deadline is the 17th of August. We're hoping that you will give us your comments so that we can then adopt those guidelines and start with the registration of information officers. We've been consulting with various parties who have a mandate of processing personal information. For instance, the National Consumer Commission, particularly on issues of direct marketing, the National Credit Regulator. And what we have done was we have unpacked the POPIA, and we did that to look at each and every section and to look at whether there is something that we have to put in place for the interpretation of that section, be it a guidance note, be it a guideline, be it an explanatory note. So we have that, and we have prioritized the areas in which we will be developing these guidance notes or guidelines. But what is now interesting is that our priority list has been affected, because as we have as we talk to our stakeholders, they then ask questions and request us to provide guidance on issues that were not high up on our list. So we find that now and again we have to adjust our list to prioritize areas that we had not envisaged there would be priority. For instance, people are asking us to provide guidance on prior authorization that has come up. People are asking us to provide guidance on trans-border flow of information. So now and again, as I say, we have to adjust our priorities so that we can then be able to guide people on issues that they ask. And I'm sure out of this meeting as well, there will be a number of questions that will come that will also require us to provide guidance very quickly. We have, like everybody else, we have challenges. The budget is very small, as you can imagine, and it is not likely to improve in the light of the economic situation that we all find ourselves in because of COVID. So we'll have to make, good with what we have instead of sitting and complaining. We just have to work, and we're working extremely hard at all times. We are drafting documents, drafting guidance notes. We don't have the luxury of outsourcing this work because we don't have money to pay consultants. So we do everything ourselves. And finally, because we don't have time, we also are doing consultations with other people who will assist us to enforce the act. We'll be consulting, for instance, the judiciary, law enforcement agencies, to just bring them up to speed on what is expected of them, because once next year comes, we have to ensure that everybody is on board and it's expected, and they are aware of what is expected of them. Because of time constraints, I'm going to leave it here so that I can give others the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Advocate Tlakula. I was actually also going to come in and say that in the interest of time, I think we need to move into the Q&A session now. And there we'll really start with Claire, just to find out from a business perspective where she is and what her experience has been. So the question there really is, we know, of course, that Mr. Price is doing a number of things and has already done a number of things in terms of data protection to comply, but what kind of support do you need to allow you to be able to be in a better position by the 1 July 2021 deadline?
Thanks, Atelo. Morning, everybody. Yes, I'm pleased to say that we've achieved and completed quite a few quick wins in the last while. It has definitely been a team effort. And to be ready for the 1st of July next year, I think first and foremost is the ongoing support from Mr. Price Management and our project sponsors who see the value in protecting personal information as a business asset, and most importantly, protecting our valued customers and partners' information. Also, ongoing support from our data protection team and business is imperative. If I can just take one step back, shortly after I joined the group, I also joined the data protection team, which at that time consisted of 3 of us, and we were doing what we could whilst also having other responsibilities. Fast forward to now, and we've established a greater data protection team, which includes reps from across the business, from all areas, including our trading divisions, and of course IT, which is an important partner in this journey. And the data and our group's data protections team's commitment to the process and willingness to participate has made it a lot easier for us to get where we are today and to continue working towards the 1st of July deadline. And then we also need support from all of our associates outside of the data protection team at head office, in the stores, including the African stores, to be willing to learn more about data protection and execute what we've trained them on. It's still early days in terms of awareness and training, but I think we've made some good strides so far. Also, we are in the process of a data protection gap analysis, and gaps may be identified where we need to enhance or update or implement our systems or procedures to continue protecting personal information. And here we may need to allocate or outlay a fair portion of resources from both human and financial, and to do this, in order to do this, and this is something that all companies will be facing during this time, and it's not just unique to Mr. Price. And lastly, which the regulator has already mentioned, is support from the regulator by way of guidance and advice during this period leading up to the 1st of July 2021. And this would be most valuable and I think appreciated from all of us to reach our goals in terms of data protection. Thanks, Elo.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Claire. So now we just have a number of questions, and of course the questions are ultimately limitless, so you ultimately have to end up picking out some of the key questions. And these questions are really just for anyone from the information regulator to, you can decide amongst yourselves, and I think you already have decided what kind of questions each person may be able to answer. So the one question is, what advice do you have for an organization that's trying to decide what their next steps are when it comes to data protection?
Hi, good morning, Stella. Hi, good morning, Stella. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can, yes.
All right. Yes, I'll tackle that question. I think the first thing that one needs to focus on is compliance. In fact, during the grace period, the grace period is not there to allow people to get away with non-compliance. It is primarily there to get people to get their houses in order when the grace period is done, that they are fully compliant with POPIA. The Act also says that the regulator can give advice in terms of Section 40, in particular Section 41, Roman 5. It empowers the regulator to give advice to any public body, any minister, any private body on any particular aspect relating to POPIA in terms of clarification with the Act. I hope that has answered that question.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Sizwe. Another question that is quite prominent is, what are the first things that a responsible party should really do or should really focus on?
All right, so I'm going to tackle that one again. I think the primary point of departure should always be the 8 conditions of lawful processing. I call them the 8 principles because they are actually adopted from the internationally adopted data protection principles, but they are the 8 conditions for lawful processing. I think once you start with that, understanding that they are collective duty, not just a single duty. In other words, there are 8 conditions which collectively have to be respected. Once one understands what they mean and how they apply, whether one is an operator or one is a responsible party, I think that is the first departure point to compliance.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. And then another question really is, do you anticipate, or what is the likelihood that you might extend the grace period? And do you anticipate that you'll take enforcement action soon after the grace period ends?
All right, Stella, here's my last answer to that one. As I said, the grace period is for responsible parties and the operators to really get compliant. I think it's extremely premature now to say that the grace period may be extended. The legislation does make provision for possible extension by the minister, but where we are standing now as the regulator, we are saying it's 12 months grace period, and from that point on, we will definitely be enforcing if the grace period has not been extended. Thank you, Stella.
Thanks a lot for that. I think that'll definitely answer a number of people's questions. And then, how do we enable data flows to South Africa? What are we going to do? Sorry, are you coming in for that one? Sorry, I thought you were going to say something. Okay, I think there was a bit of a mix-up there. So it's, what are we going to do in South Africa to ensure that data exporters in the EU or EEA are able to export data to data importers in South Africa?
Hi, good morning. It's Varsha Sulal. I'll take that question. I think what we need to be mindful of is that when personal information is received from other countries, the provisions and the requirements of POPIA will apply, as the processing is going to take place within the borders of South Africa. Thanks. And with regard to information that is flowing out of South Africa, then the provisions of Section 72 will apply. The regulator is in the process of developing guidelines on how Section 72 will be regulated. Thanks.
Sicelo, you're on mute, Sicelo.
Oh, sorry about that. It was bound to happen. This is something that many people have experienced. Yes, sorry about that. So this question is on the draft guidelines on the registration of the information officer, and it's really wanting to find out if the CEO or the information officer delegated by the CEO will be held responsible for failing to ensure that POPIA is complied with in a particular organization.
Good afternoon, Sicelo. It's Colin Weapon here. I'll be responding to that question. There is a draft guideline on the registration of information officers, which the regulator has developed. But what we can say at this moment, and also what has been stipulated in draft, is that yes, an information officer can be held liable, and there's a specific section in the draft guidelines which actually refers to what we would call accountability of the information officer, despite him or her delegating his or her responsibility to a deputy information officer, he or she still remains accountable and liable. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Again, sorry. The question is around when the information regulator anticipates that it'll take over from the South African Human Rights Commission when it comes to POPIA and its enforcement.
Thank you, Sicelo. It's Lebogang. I'll take the question. As you are aware, the proclamation of POPIA, specifically Section 1151, provides that the effective date of POPIA amendment is the 30th of June 2021. The information regulator and the South African Human Rights Commission are finalizing the handover of the POPIA functions to the information regulator on the 30th of June 2021. So there's a memorandum of cooperation between the information regulator and the South African Human Rights Commission, so that we have an action plan, so that come the 30th of June 2021, there's a smooth, seamless transition of the POPIA function from the South African Human Rights Commission to the information regulator. Thank you.
And actually, a related question to that is then, will the current exemptions for POPIA manuals be extended past 1 January 2021?
Thank you very much, Sicelo. I think the issue there is the moratorium that we have in place. We are aware that it ends in December 2020. So I think the issue is what will happen between December 2020 and June 2021. We have resolved in one of our meetings with the South African Human Rights Commission that the South African Human Rights Commission will formally request an extension of the moratorium up until such time that it is viable. For an example, I think the question will be, what will the current exemption for submission of POPIA manuals for private bodies, will it be extended beyond the 1st of January 2021? So the answer to that is that the Human Rights Commission will formally request an extension of the exemption for the submission of POPIA manual until such time that we take over the function. Thank you very much, Sika.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot. And then, and this question, sorry, were you going to say something, John?
Yes, now if I could just come in on that point. For me, this is a very important thing, because what's happened in the past is that there are various people who are opportunists, and they see POPIA manuals as an opportunity to make some money. And so if the exemption of smaller organizations not to have a POPIA manual isn't granted, the opportunists, I say they come out of the woodwork, but they suddenly appear and start saying to everybody, you have to have a POPIA manual, and they charge a significant fee for that POPIA manual. So I think from my perspective, it's a very important issue to be clear on, so that we don't end up with lots of small businesses who don't need to have a POPIA manual and shouldn't have a POPIA manual, that they don't end up spending money on a POPIA manual. So I just thought I'd add that bit from my perspective.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. Another key issue that keeps coming up is really around foreign law and international best practice. And it's to really find out from the information regulator how much, if at all, really they're going to be looking at foreign law or international best practice to try and develop or interpret POPIA. For example, the Gdpr, and Advocate Pansy Klakula did mention the Gdpr earlier on in her introductory remarks.
I'll take that. The regulator will indeed benchmark with foreign jurisdictions and does take into account international best practice in the further development of POPIA. However, I mean, the perception is that the GDPR affords greater protection than POPIA. However, in some aspects, POPIA affords more extensive protection because it applies to natural and juristic persons, as our chairperson has mentioned, whilst the GDPR only applies to information about living natural persons. And POPIA extends protection to information collected about companies, body corporates, trusts, and other similar entities together with natural persons. So the possibility for POPIA to be developed in line with international best practice is there. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that. I see in terms of time, we're not doing too badly. And I know there have been a number of questions that have come in. Perhaps I can hand over to you, John, and you can just pick out some of the key questions with Nathan's help that have come up, and just talk around that, perhaps.
Yeah, sure, Sikelo. Yeah, Jeepers, and I've been totally overwhelmed and amazed by the number of questions. We probably had 50 questions submitted by different people in the run-up to today. We've had 60 odd questions during the course of this session already. And it's clear to me that we really have our work cut out for us. There really are many questions that people have, and I think this is understandable. You know, South Africa, we've never had a data protection law before. Other jurisdictions have had these laws for 50 years, some of them, 40 years, 50 years. And so in South Africa, there are lots of questions. There are going to be lots of issues that we need to resolve over the next 12 months. And it really is going to require a collective effort. And I think as we've pointed out, the regulator has a very important role to play. And a lot of the questions are coming through are asking about, can we have guidance on particular issues? And it's great that Sizwe mentioned that the regulator will be giving guidance. There are also many questions around dependencies. So if a responsible party has to do something, but it's dependent on the regulator having put something in place, possibly the example of registering your information officer, that can only be done once the regulator is able to, there's a facility or a mechanism or an electronic portal for the responsible party to register that information officer. So there are many dependencies, and that's why, again, it really is going to take a collective effort. And I'm very conscious and appreciate that the information regulator is working extremely hard and has limited resources like many of us have as well. So we're going to have to be very creative in how we find answers to these questions. So I think, you know, as I said, there really are so many, it's difficult to pick up themes. I think a key thing that I want to commit Michalsons to be doing over the next while is to look at these questions you've asked in a lot more detail, and then we'll try and answer as many of them as we can through different channels. It might be on our website, it might be in further sessions like this. And then we'll play a facilitating role to provide those questions through to the regulator and facilitate getting further answers to a variety of questions. So I don't know if we should dive into specific areas now. Yeah, I mean, there really are a lot. Maybe what we can do is let's ask Nathan Ross if he's got any key themes he's been able to identify. And maybe you can ask the questions of us or the panel, and we can have a discussion around some of those key themes.
Oh, yeah, definitely, John. A lot of the questions relate to compliance. Some of them are very specific, others are general, but I've managed to identify a few themes. The big starting question is where do companies start? Now that there's a deadline in place, now that there are questions about registering information officers, what is the best way for companies to start?
Great. So I think if I'll start here, but please, anyone else on the panel, please interrupt me if you'd like to. But I think for me, the key place to start is organizations need to do an organizational impact assessment. In other words, what is the impact of POPIA on your specific organization? What does it mean for you? And I think this is what is so tricky, is that it means different things for different organizations. There really isn't a one size fits all. Organizations have different activities, and the impact on different activities is vastly different. And so, you know, if I give you an example, if you're manufacturing nuts and bolts, it might be that you process very little personal information as part of that activity. But if you're a direct marketer and what you do is profile people and target them, trying to sell them insurance or whatever it might be based on those profiles, obviously there your activities are extremely intensive in the processing of personal data. And so for me, that's the key place to start, is to understand the impact on your specific organization. And then I think a few other key tips, and obviously we can talk about this for a long time, but Mark Hank and I have had lots of discussions around this, that it really is important to get your governance right in your organization when it comes to data protection. It's very important, and Claire mentioned how they've got a team and a variety of different role players who are assisting. It's absolutely crucial, for example, that you identify who your information officer is going to be, who the team is that's going to support them, who the champions are in different areas, and really get that governance right in conjunction with the governing body as well. And then from there are many other steps, including things like seeing what software tools you can you can use to help you, and also then doing a gap analysis, as Claire mentioned, is another key step many organizations are taking. You know, you can't work out what you need to do really until you've had a look and compared your organization with the law to see where you're not compliant. And then you're able to work on those gaps and take action to fill those gaps by the end of the grace period. So that's a feeling of where to start and a sense of it. But it is.
If I may come in there. And an issue which relates specifically to the things that will have to be addressed by the regulator, and that is that in a number of instances, what I'm not seeing is the necessity to possibly look at codes of conduct within particular industries or professions, because what we've seen overseas is that those do become very important. They are able to set out the nuances of organization or particular sectors of organizations, how they need to deal with data protection. And I think that that's going to become very important, because one of the issues as well that needs to be addressed is this one, and Advocate Lukula mentioned this, the issue of prior authorization. If one looks at the requirements of prior authorization, there are many areas and many organizations that process information that would need prior authorization. If there's a code in place, of course, that need goes away if you're a member of an entity that has a code of conduct. And I think that it is important for our professional bodies and others to also look at this and contribute to how they will actually see the processing of information. Because as John has correctly said, it is different you can have two organizations even in the same type of business that will process information differently. Codes do become very important. And I think another aspect of this is just simply a question that I saw Justin Weiss raise, and that is how technologies are being dealt with. And I think that is quite novel for many of us in South Africa, and we're going to have to learn how we use the technologies to actually assist us in what we're doing. This is an important aspect of what we're dealing with, particularly for those parties that are processing large volumes of information. They will need tools to assist them in dealing with that. And those are issues that I think a lot of companies should be looking at. Early, I wouldn't say necessarily the very first thing that they do, but definitely early in what they are dealing with. And possibly in those instances, go to the regulator with and seek guidance around how they might do those things. Thanks very much. I hand you back to Sikelo and to take further questions. Thanks.
Yes, thanks a lot, Mark. So one of the things that I wanted to do, just getting closer to the closing, is to run a quick poll just to get a sense of what people's take is on these kind of sessions. But before I get to that, I just wanted to check perhaps with just the members of the information regulator, whether they don't have any maybe additional short, quick remarks before I get to that poll and wrap up the session.
Thank you, Sikelo. From my side, just on the issue of prior authorization and also on the issue of the registration of information officers. The information regulator, as the chairperson has indicated, is looking at a possible guidance note with regards to prior authorization in terms of section 57 of POPIA. And then with regards to the registration of information officers, we are busy looking at and receiving submissions with regards to the draft guidance note guidelines that we've provided. I think it was on the 17th of July, and the closing date for comments will be on the 16th of August at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for that. John, did you want to say something?
Yes, I did, but I think someone else wants to go first. All right, no, sorry, I heard some feedback there. I think I just wanted to mention that, again, one of the roles Michalsons intends to play is that we will be coordinating a response to different guidelines that are issued from time to time. And the one dealing with information officers is a good example. We plan to coordinate and consolidate a response dealing with the information officers. And I think I'm very mindful that the information regulator, if they're going to receive 500, 600 responses and comment on guidelines, it's very difficult for them to process that. So we'd also like to play a role there in assisting to almost have one consolidated comment going back on different guidelines. So that's a role we're keen to play.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, John. I'll just run this last poll. And yeah, let me launch that. So if you could please just vote. And as I mentioned, we just about wanting to get a sense of whether you'd like more of these kind of questions.
I think while people are voting on that, you know, I am very conscious that there are lots of questions that you've asked that we haven't managed to get to, and really there are lots. And I saw that there was a comment from Sizwe saying that maybe after this event we need to facilitate some way of answering those more in writing. And I really don't want you to leave today feeling that your questions haven't been answered. One idea is that on Friday, we are doing a session with the members of the Michalsons Data Protection Program, where we'll be unpacking these questions in more detail and answering more of them there. But really, we also are going to identify themes, and we will then try and answer as many through our website. We do try and keep our websites as up to date as possible and as current as possible. And then also we'll liaise with the regulator in order to work out how we can try and facilitate some answers to key questions that impact them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. I'll just end the poll and share the results. And I think the results confirm exactly what you said, John, which is that people have definitely enjoyed this session and would want more of these kinds of sessions, because as there are many questions and it's impossible to get through even a majority of them in the time that we had. And so that necessarily means that there must be other sessions, follow-up sessions to look into these things and take deeper dives.
Yes, great. And I think, you know, again, just to stress this effort, the point that really there are lots of questions, there are lots of challenges, there are many things that we need to get right over the next 12 months, but I really believe we can do it, particularly if we work together. And I think particularly where we have common compliance requirements, so many of us need to do the same things to comply. And it really makes sense to work together to achieve that. If we're working individually, it's not going to work. We need to work collectively to solve the common problems. Sure, we'll each have our own individual issues that we'll need to address, but if we work together, we really can solve problems so much quicker. Back to you, Stella.
Mark, yes.
Just to endorse what John is saying, I think that one of the things that we, as responsible parties and information officers out there, need to be mindful of is that regardless of whatever circumstances there may be, everybody has constraints, and the economic constraints are going to make it very difficult for the information regulator, and we don't need to overwhelm them with issues which really we could deal with and collectively, and as John has said, prepare those questions in such a way that they can be dealt with collectively. I think that is going to be our best chance of succeeding in actually strengthening the information regulator and allowing the information regulator to get on with some very, very important tasks of enforcement at a later stage. We all know that there are many people out there that are taking advantage of the vacuum that there has been in data protection in South Africa for some time. And we need to assist the information regulator in addressing that vacuum. And I suggest, I mean, one of the information regulator's primary responsibilities is consultation. But very often we can probably create some of that consultation beforehand and do it collectively. Thank you very much, Sikelo.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo all of that, Mark. I mean, I'd like to thank the various people from the Information Regulator's Office who joined us today. I'd like to thank Claire as well, and just the attendees in general. I mean, these sessions are, invaluable, I think, for everyone involved. I think, of course, I understand that people have different contexts, but I think there are a lot of overlaps, a lot of commonalities, and this kind of consultation and engagement is very important. So thanks a lot to everyone for being here and joining us for this session. Yeah, I think we can really end on that note.
Yes, thank you, Sicelo. And thank you for everyone attending, and particularly thank you to the regulator. I really do appreciate your time. And I know you're very busy, and I think it really demonstrates your willingness and wish to be accessible, which I really do commend. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.